motion on our requisitions?
Yeah, I'm fine with them.
Yeah, me too as well, yes as well. Okay, do we have anything to add on?
I do have one item. We need to acknowledge the receipt of an annexation of 186.285 acres in Hamilton Township to the city of South Lebanon, and this is an expedited type 2 annexation.
Is this something that we need to act on today, Bruce?
No.
Okay, so we acknowledge the receipt, does that require some sort of resolution?
No.
No, okay, so we acknowledge the receipt, thank you.
Great.
Anything else?
That's all I have.
Okay, so then we have a public hearing to consider the issuance of hospital revenue bonds for Community First Solutions. And who's going to present on that? Now, does this require any testimony, Bruce, today?
No.
Okay, very good.
Hi, we were here a few months ago. I'm Allie Kimbler. This with me is Josh Grossman with Dinsmore and Scholl. We are bond counsel for Community First Solutions and its affiliates. With us is Brian Kraus, Chief Financial Officer of Community First Solutions. This public hearing is being held in connection with the possible issuance by Warren County of its bonds anticipated to be issued in a principal amount not to exceed $8 million pursuant to Chapter 140 of the Ohio Revised Code. Upon the issuance, the proceeds will be made available to the borrowers, who will consist of Community First Solutions and Colonial Senior Services II, both of which are Ohio nonprofit corporations. The proceeds of the bonds will be used to finance the cost of acquiring, constructing, and improving an existing 41-unit assisted living and assisted living memory care community, and that's located at 6491 Reading Road in Mason, Ohio. The proceeds will also be used to help pay certain costs of issuance of the bonds. In connection with this possible issuance, we would be asking that certain documents be executed, including an agreement of lease, a sublease, a bond purchase agreement, and a tax exemption agreement. And we mentioned this last time, but it's important, so we'll say it again. These bonds are backed solely by the revenues of the borrowers, as well as other members of an obligated group. No taxpayer dollars will be pledged or used to pay back these bonds. Bonds do not constitute debt or general obligations of the county, and do not in any way affect the ability of the county to issue bonds for its own purposes. We provided some documents for you guys, and if there are any questions on those or any other questions, we'd be happy to answer.
Where about on Reading Road is this? Do you know?
I am not sure of the exact location. I'm not from around here, but
It's 6491 Reading Road.
yes.
Well, I was right. Do you know if it's
Man.
south or north of Tylersville Road?
Brian is the expert with all things
You'll probably know.
facility.
I do know. Yeah, it's on, right by Snyder, on that gas station on the corner there where that Shell is. It's right,
Okay.
right by that. It's currently called Bright Star Mason. We're purchasing it from.
So it's on the, it's gonna be on the west side of the road?
Yes,
Okay.
backs up to the, like,
The
the
park,
Everybody's
the
Farm
park, the
subdivision.
Makino Park there is
Right by
there?
Makino Park, yes,
Uh-huh.
exactly right.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, do anybody have any questions?
No.
Thank you so much, it is very persuasive.
And we just need to officially, for the record, close the public hearing.
Okay, well, we'll do, so we will do that, and then we'll have discussion. And also, before we do close the public hearing, I'd like to invite any of the public to speak. Anybody else want to speak to this matter, either for or against these issuance of these bonds? Okay, seeing none, do you have any questions at all?
No, I'll move to close the public hearing.
Okay, second.
All right, call the roll on that.
Mr. Grossman?
Yes?
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
No. I mean, yes.
Okay, do we have a motion? Do we need a motion then to accept the bonds or to
So-
approve them?
I've got a resolution here authorizing the issuance and sale of not to exceed $8 million, County of Warren, Ohio, Hospital Facilities Improvement Revenue Bonds, Series 2025, authorizing the execution and delivery of an agreement of lease, a sublease, a bond purchase agreement, and a tax exemption agreement in connection with the issuance of such bonds, and authorizing other documents and actions in connection with the issuance of such bonds.
So
Okay.
moved.
Second?
All right, any discussion? No? Seeing none, call the roll.
Mr. Grossman?
Yes?
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We have, the documents here for you to sign, so place them.
Okay, we'll get them. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
You bet, thank you. All right, Auditor Nolan, you're up to discuss these changes to the Ohio property tax system, where we will lose, what, about a third of our money?
About a third of our money, yes. Actually, I'm glad Dinsmore here. They wrote a very well worded, along with every other bond council in the state yesterday, telling the legislature that what they're doing is illegal, unconstitutional, and a really bad idea. So I've been telling them that for several weeks. The Commissioners Association and Auditors Association both have been telling them that they've not been listening, but now that bond council has weighed in, hopefully that will move that. So there's a large number of proposals being made at the state legislature. Normally we don't get together to discuss them because normally they don't impact us that much. These ones do. These would have fairly catastrophic impacts on most counties in the state, even on Warren County. I mean, what they've proposed, and there's this general idea, let's get rid of all responsibilities at the state and move them to the local level, which in general I think as a group we usually kind of support. These go too far, and they put it all on your backs, frankly. Requiring us to pass new sales tax levies
That's what it is.
or income tax levies at the municipal level to make up the large amount of revenue that would be needed for the sheriff's office, for local police departments, for veteran services, all of the above. As you know, the voters of Warren County are not apt to pass tax levies almost ever, and I think would be unlikely to pass this. But that's for Warren County. That's the best case scenario. In most counties, even if they pass the levies that are proposed, which they wouldn't bring in enough revenue to make up for what was lost. And so it's very large changes, again, not legal, not constitutional, but if they pass them, that will put a large burden on the county commissioners to come up with new sources of revenue to fill those gaps that are out there. So
Or cuts.
cuts, yeah, or significant cuts. Yeah, I mean, a third of our revenue would be gone instantly. And in the best case scenario, you could pass a new levy in November if you started immediately doing that, that you would get revenue for in May. And so you'd have a 5-month gap where you'd just be out that revenue. And so $15 million or so you would be out in the best case scenario. More likely you'd be out $30 million a year, a third of your revenue.
Well, does this authorize us to raise that is the commissioners, to raise the sales tax to compensate us for this? Is that what it's done?
No, it gives you the authority to put on the ballot an additional sales tax.
Okay, so we would have to go to the ballot to get this, and if we don't get that approved, we're simply we have this big reduction. And do we know who's sponsoring this and what their basis is?
So the sponsor of the bill is Chairman Romer, who's the head of House Ways and Means, who's been around a long time, and a freshman representative from Ashtabula County named David Thomas, a very young man who's been put in charge of property tax reform by the Speaker. So Commissioner Jones and I have known Representative Romer for a long time. I've known Representative Thomas for many years. He was the county auditor, been around a little bit, and I've talked to him 100 times. He's never once mentioned this to me. He texted me, every other bill that he's proposed, he's texted to me, this is what we're thinking about doing, and this one he did not. So that leads me to believe he's probably not the brains behind it, but I can't say who is. There's not a single group that has come out in support of this legislation. But as of now, it's the only legislation that's currently proposed that would give immediate property tax relief. And so all of the other ideas that have been given to them, they've rejected. It's the only idea that they've put forward that gives immediate property tax relief. Lots of other problems, but property tax relief. So that's what scares us, is that they claim to have an edict from above, being Speaker of the House, not above, but from the Speaker of the House, saying that they must reduce property taxes on January 1st of 2026. We've given them some other ideas that reduce residential property taxes. So we're hoping they'll push for those, but if this happens, we're going to have to very quickly pivot and come up with either significant cuts or revenue increases to keep the budget that's currently in place. And we just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of it, and that if you have conversations with Rep. Teska, Rep. Matthews, or Senator Wilson, I've had conversations with all three, varying levels of success. They are definitely aware of it, but because it's part of the budget, as you all know, a lot of times people vote for things they don't like because it's part of this bigger budget and there are things that they like in there. This, to me, is a poison pill. You can't vote for this with this in it.
Yeah, this is kind of a deal breaker with me, that this is why we have local elected representatives. And to me, this just seems like a complete gimmick, that the general public needs to understand that 75–80% of your property tax bill has nothing to do with the county. It goes directly to your local school district. That is not proposed to change, correct?
No, that's proposed to change as well. They get a portion of inside millage as well. And so this would cut their inside millage. What the representatives don't understand, and that would actually benefit you and Commissioner Grossman, because you're in non-20 mil floor districts. So your taxes would come down. Commissioner Jones' taxes would not come down, because they would cut the inside millage from Springboro schools, and then I, by law, would have to raise their millage up to 20, and they'd end up at a net zero, which is 75% of the school districts in the state. So in your unique situation of Kings and Mason, this would actually be a property tax cut, and not an insignificant one.
So the school districts would actually lose revenue there also.
Correct, and they would be in the same boat. They would be required to go put an income tax on to try to replace the revenue that they've lost. They would have to do that by November as well.
Oh, so they couldn't do another school levy on the property tax?
There's different proposals in it. They could possibly do an increase in property taxes that's voted, but they're strongly encouraging them. There's a lot of restrictions on when you can put a property tax on in this legislation. They're encouraging them to move to local income taxes at the schools.
So apparently the theory behind this, I'm just guessing,
Yeah.
but the theory behind this is to not necessarily shift the amount of money that's raised, because we're all operating, balancing our budgets. We do all of that, and these local jurisdictions do that as well, but they want us to take it from property tax and get it on a different form of taxation.
That's right.
So in this case, we would have to have some sort of massive campaign to raise the sales tax and point out something like this. 60% of our sales tax are paid by non-residents. So you're going to get a tax cut. Many of you in the county would get a tax cut on your property tax. In particular, that will benefit perhaps a lot of people that have fixed incomes. However, this is going to be then paid for, we hope that you'll pass a sales tax increase, which primarily the people from Warren County aren't going to be the ones shouldering the burden for that. So it shifts it to a sales tax form, which is a much more regressive tax, and which, there's arguments either way about the benefits of that. But of course, it relies upon the fact that we can actually pass such a tax.
Well, and currently, as the board well knows, given the work we've done with how we finance the jail, is that we have the authority to raise the sales tax without the vote of the people in the public setting, and we did that in order to finance the jail, and that has since sunset, since the jail is now complete. In this instance, the legislature is not allowing the board, in its discretion, as we have in all other cases, to do that. And so it leads me to believe that in actuality, they aren't looking for a continuation of the services. They actually are trying to force, once again, local governments to continue to, you know, of all sorts, to do more with less and to do less with less in this case, when you're talking about how substantial it is. And so, you know, it's not simply saying, well, raise the sales tax. It's simply saying, raise the sales tax. It's very draconian, and we're going to make it happen instantaneously, and we aren't going to give you all the tools that you currently have to be able to meet those needs. And what's incredibly frustrating about this, among all the things that the auditor has pointed out, is, you know, the County Commissioners Association, of which I've been on the board for 5 years, we have been active in the conversation around property tax reform and have supported it and have on the record and have offered lots of ideas around that are ripe for conversation. Similarly, and I must give a shout out to Auditor Nolan, who is literally the state's expert from the auditor standpoint and has been leading this conversation similarly for years and offering up, especially it was heightened during the reevaluation process, ideas to put forward to the legislature, who said they're committed to property tax reform. And what has come out very quickly, without discussion, with the intention of rolling it into this bigger budget, is something that the legislature just shirking its responsibility, as we're their partner. We are a creature of statute and can do those things that they allow us to do. We also are one of 10 states that locally administer human services, but the state is responsible for those things. And they just are saying, we don't care about any of that, you all deal with it. And so CCAO and the auditors and all the school groups and the veterans and you know, the local law enforcement is incredibly impacted by this without any real discussion. And it's just, you know, as if, you know, it ignores the reality of county government, which is when we have had circumstances where those who have either through levies or through inside millage have collected more than they are spending in a reasonable amount, we have worked with the auditor and have worked with those entities to roll back property taxes for residents. We've done it as recently as 2023. You know, we don't sit and hoard a bunch of resources, and we don't sit and look to expand the scope of government. But, you know, as I think about losing a third of our budget, while we historically only we try to constrain our spending as best as we can to those things that we're statutorily required to do, there are things that we do fund that we're not statutorily required to do. We are not required to pay for road patrol in this county. And so when you consider how much of our budget goes to public safety, and we are not required to provide the road patrol on that, it's hard for me to even conceive of a scenario where that road patrol isn't going to be on the table. You know, veteran services is impacted by this. I mean, we fund a lot of our core basic services that taxpayers expect through the inside millage. And you know, what is the most concerning about this, it's as if the more we talk about it with leaders in Columbus, the less they want to hear about the reality that we actually face in managing our budgets. And so I'm just, you know, first of all, I'm super appreciative of you, Matt, and the work and the leadership you've done. I mean, I don't know how many times you've testified on this subject, not just this bill, but on this subject. I know you've been on some of the calls that I've been on, and I know you've been on others with our commission colleagues through our committee process. And so I'm really grateful for that. I know that this is volunteer work and born out of your commitment to the community. But, you know, I appreciate your willingness to be here too, because I feel like if we don't push back very loudly in this moment in time, something might be rammed down our throats that's just ill-conceived and not consistent with how we operate as a county. And I did share with Commissioner Young and Commissioner Grossman this morning the bond council letter, which was incredibly strong. I can't think of too many occasions where all the bond council have come together to speak on this, so that was really impactful. But I just, you know, we are in support. I'm in support, and I suspect, you know, Tom and Dave are in support of property tax reform, and our association continues to offer up time, expertise, ideas to that end, but that is not what this is.
Well, all right, so when is this gonna be voted on? When is it coming up for a vote?
Very quickly. So the budget is due by June 30th. And
Next
so,
week.
yeah, the expectation is that the House and Senate have both passed versions of the budget that are different. It's now back in the House. I'm testifying tomorrow. They're having more hearings on this. But the expectation is that this will go to conference committee, and that the conference committee, like usual in the budget, even though they promised they wouldn't, they're going to create a whole new bill in the conference committee, and they'll roll out that. And then once it comes out of conference committee, it's yes or no. It's not, I like this, but I don't like that. It's yes or no.
No amendments.
And a lot of pressure will be put on our representatives, who will tell us that they don't like this, but that they have to vote yes. So we don't know what's going to be in it. But
Well,
that's
we need to do something.
Yeah.
Because this is not okay.
That's right.
I appreciate Commissioner Jones's, I mean, she knows this stuff like the back of her hand, being in her prior role, and the way the process and, you know, the sausage is made. Obviously, you're right at the tip of the spear of this subject. I always like to break it down because, again, people are watching this, you know, I don't know it like you guys know it, but I'm kind of a common sense guy a little bit. Some people say I don't have any, but it's, the way I see it is there's a couple of facts. Start with the fact of there is no county, and I would say no government in the state of Ohio that is more fiscally conservative than Warren County. Period, end of story. I would say no one in the state of Ohio has ran a public budget as well as us over the last 20 years. That is a fact. It is also a fact we produce the greatest number of Republican votes net in the state. That is a fact. Now we get into some things that are also facts. Property taxes are a big deal to a lot of voters, and they have gone up a lot. That is a fact. But what is also a fact, the result of them going up in large part is because of the real estate market and price appreciation that we have done such a good job of making certain counties wonderful places to live, that your $300,000 house is now worth $500,000 over the last 10 years or so. So as the matter of law, your taxes on a $500,000 property are higher than on a $300,000 property. So your net worth as a taxpayer has gone up by $200,000 in this example, but yet your property tax bill has probably gone up several $1,000s a year. I'll take a $200,000 increase if it costs me a couple $1,000s extra per year. But some people, that is a huge deal to them simply because they're on a fixed income and they can't afford it. So there is a problem there. But to come in and tell a county, and again, I can't speak for every other county, but to tell our county, which is the best run financially, with the most fiscally conservative commissioners you could possibly have, that we have to come in now where there is no waste. That during 2008 and 9, when every government became a fiscally conservative government because the economy was collapsing, we didn't lay anybody off because there wasn't any fat. We didn't have to. So to come in and tell someone like us that are pounding the table, don't do this, do something, don't do this. And I agree from the standpoint of, I'm sure it is unconstitutional because, praise the Lord, we don't have to go and borrow money. There are counties that have gone and borrowed boatloads of money to fund their operations or to build their jails or whatever they've done.
Like
in kind of
87
the
of them,
normal,
yeah.
the normal way of doing it. And they have promised bondholders a promise to repay that debt using general obligations of the county, which now are not going to exist. That is not legal.
Can you imagine the litigation on that? I mean, it's just, I mean, and as crazy as it is, it doesn't mean it's not going to happen in this budget bill. I mean, that's what's so frustrating about it, is that the conversations that we've tried to have are met with just a no. I mean, it's just, and so that is the thing that is just, you know, we've all seen this before, you know, it's like there's always a lot of talk and, you know, heat of the debate and all this stuff. This is different. I mean, would you not agree?
We were told this is happening.
Yeah.
When I confronted Rep. Thomas and I explained all of the things that you guys just went through to him, and he said, this is happening. And, you know, I think they've lightened that a little bit, but something is going to happen. They feel an obligation, whether it's from the speaker or the threat of this constitutional amendment or whatever it is. They feel pressure to do something. We would like them to do the right thing. Commissioner Jones, we've spent years telling them what you can do, as we've talked about, it's
And they've been
addressing
talking
school
about
millage.
this for a long time.
Long time.
And
Long time.
where are we?
And nothing has gotten passed time after time after time, even though we've told them, to all the points you made, Dave, it's exactly right. The schools are where the problem is. The school millage is where it is. We need to address school funding. We need to address how we handle schools. But that's a small part of what they're putting forward, and they need to make that the lead.
And I want to underscore the point that you made, which is for 75% of the districts in the county, it's not that schools are any less of a challenge for them to finance in their communities. They will not benefit from the reduction to the inside millage from the schools. And so the idea that this is going to provide property tax relief in this county, or I would even say in the vast majority of counties, I mean,
Yeah.
most of them are at the 20 mil floor, right?
75% of the districts in the state, yeah. Yeah, I mean, normally I don't come presenting, you know, we do our thing in the association and we talk to the legislature, and Warren County is usually pretty quiet in
Yeah.
the whole process, because we do our own thing, we don't worry about the state. This is an example where they could do such damage to us that I think it's important that we kind of step up and say, hey, don't do this, you know, look at alternatives, talk to the experts, don't do this.
I would recommend you drafting a letter to our 3 representatives.
We have, you have that. Martin has prepared a draft for the
Oh, I thought this
board.
was maybe going to the state or something. So this is, yeah, I mean, to the 2 representatives, our 1 state senator, that just how adamantly we oppose this.
I appreciate that.
Well, you've talked to them.
All right.
Where do they stand on it?
There's this idea, and Shannon eloquently put it all together. I don't want to double down on it too much, but there are no obligations at the state of Ohio. There's this idea. I mean, there's I think 30 reps and senators under the age of 35 right now that have just been drilled into their heads over their short careers that there are no obligations in the state of Ohio. All obligations are local, and that's just false. Human services, mental health, education in our Constitution are jobs of the state that we do for them as
Yes.
county government.
And they don't fund us to do a lot of them and force us to raise taxes on our constituents to do their job.
And their idea is we flip that whole script, that we have basically 88 sovereign entities within the state that each get to decide how we're gonna do everything, how we're gonna fund everything, as long as we do it under their set of rules and their guidelines, and it's a very difficult, I've studied all of the states, because that's the whole idea of our government, right? We're gonna find states that do it well and we'll copy those. There's nobody that does it that way. No one. Arizona's the closest, and if you look up Arizona tax problems, you'll see it's not a place you want to copy. Tennessee has a really good model, and there are models out there that we could try to emulate. They're not doing that right now. And while everybody loves term limits, it's part of the problem with term limits. Is we have such quick turnover of our representatives that we just don't have a lot of people up there with the experience and expertise. We don't have former county commissioners serving much. I think there's 2. We just don't have people that have been in these jobs that understand how it actually operates.
So I was asking, where do they stand? Are our representatives pushing back and saying they have to accept this?
It's so hard. Representative Teska voted against the budget in the first place. One of the very few that did. And so she says she understands and is willing to push back. Representative Matthews and Senator Wilson have other priorities that they're trying to, get through. They both voted for the budgets as they exist. Now, mind you, neither budget included this language in it. This is separate language that they say is going to get thrown in. It is very difficult to vote against a state budget. I don't respectfully, I don't think you ever voted against a budget, did you? Or
Yeah, I did.
yeah, okay, one of the few that would.
One time,
yeah.
when the House was under Democrat control.
Yeah, and so, it's very difficult, if this gets included in the budget, very unlikely that the budget would get voted down. It's happened in our history, but very rarely,
What
so.
would we have to do to make it revenue neutral to us? How much would we have to ask the voters to raise the sales tax?
So for the county alone, you'd have to raise the sales tax 1%. That's just for the county share. The school districts and the cities, we'd have to raise the sales tax if we eliminated their portions to over 12%.
Well, we're not eliminating anything for them,
State is.
right?
I'd like to pause right there, because there are other proposals that have been circulating to put commissioners in the position to be able to adjust the collected revenue for school district levies. It's once again, it's an act by the legislature to say, well, we are not going to fix the school funding system, so now we're gonna put commissioners in the role to be pressured by residents to reduce their millage, when in fact, for a levy in another community where I might not even be, I don't live, or I can't vote on their school levies. There's all these things coming at once that are gimmicks, frankly, that are, pushing that responsibility on local government. I mean, they could raise the sales tax and say, and we're gonna raise the sales tax and we're going to adjust property taxes accordingly. They're not even saying, you all do it. They're saying, you all have to go to the ballot and good luck getting it passed. I mean, they have the ability to raise the sales tax. If they think the sales tax is a better way to fund our schools, to fund our police, to fund our veteran services, they should do that. That's in their domain. But what I think we have to push back on strongly is putting on local governments to solve what is their, the school funding is their issue.
100%. And there are so many sources of revenue. I mean, Commissioner Jones knows this so much better than all the rest of us, but there are so many sources of it. They just granted a 2-week sales tax holiday, which takes our revenue, takes their revenue, and then say they don't have enough money to pay for anything. Well, don't put a sales tax holiday on, things like that look good. I've heard the word gimmick used twice. I really feel a lot of this is gimmicks. It's little things that look good on a flyer, but it's not good governance.
All right, well, we'll take a look at this letter. I mean, I don't, what is our current sales tax in Warren County? We raised it for the jail.
0.25%.
We wrote it again, and we have currently, we have authority up to a cap to raise the sales tax on our sword, don't we?
You do. So it's 6.75 right now. You can raise it a quarter to 7. That's what we did. But mind you, very little of that 6.75 comes to Warren County. The vast majority goes to the state.
Right, but we can raise it without any voter approval by another 0.25%. because
Which brings in
10 million.
10 to 12 million.
Right, but we have to raise it by a full percentage point to make up the difference. And is that just for our revenue, or is that for everybody's revenue?
That's just for the county's revenue.
Okay,
You said
and
it'd be about 12% if it was.
so when the sales tax in Ohio was originally adopted, there were promises that it would be used at the local level. And then, in the Kasich administration, they took that all away.
Right.
With every jurisdiction having a kind of a similar problem, because they were using those funds for their fire and EMS services and safety services, and then that vanished overnight in a budget process
That's
like
exactly
this
right.
one. And then all these local jurisdictions had to raise their what? Well, all of the
Property.
jurisdictions such as townships had to raise their real estate taxes, which is now what they're trying to solve, apparently. So I don't know what the answer
And
is.
your point is a really good one, Tom, and it feeds into what Matt is saying, and why I think, you know, we feel this urgency around it, is because on the local government funds with which you speak, that was during the budget process, and there were many of us, myself included, who continued to fight for the restoration of local government funds, and we were unsuccessful in doing so. But when the budget comes forward, there's lots of other things in the budget, and even though I didn't support that provision, when you look at the budget in its totality, I voted in favor of those budgets, and that's what I'm concerned about now is, you know, I know Senator Wilson and Representative Teska and Representative Adams have issues that they've been working on in the budget. And even when they're in opposition to certain elements of the budget, doesn't necessarily mean they're gonna vote no. And I think the veracity with which we push back when, to Matt's point, we don't engage in this very often is really important, because we can't afford it to get in there and allow people to say, well, I didn't support that, but I supported these other things, because it is so draconian as it relates to us. And if they want to find, you know, we have offered up things like expansions in the homestead exemption, you know, certainly other revenue sources that would also flow to the counties for us, but that's not, none of that is really on the table.
Right. The institutional knowledge here is so much larger than it is in Columbus. Honestly, I mean, that conversation is what we've been trying to have, Tom, is you cut all of our funding, and then you're surprised when property taxes go up, when that's the only avenue that they have to raise revenue. The vast majority of legislators have no idea what local government fund is and don't know that it was cut 50% just 12 years ago.
And if I remember correctly, because I was here for that, I think, wasn't it phased in? It wasn't overnight, was it?
No, it was overnight.
Yes.
It was just,
It
But
was
they
here 1
keep
year and it wasn't? I
Yeah.
thought it phased.
no, they was a pretty drastic cut, and then I mean, that's when you saw all these fire levies go on. I mean, again, we benefit so much from being Warren County and operating the way you guys operate us. Most counties don't have that benefit, and they got crushed by that. They've been struggling ever since. This takes that, we did the analysis, I mean, this pales in comparison, local government fund cut to what they're proposing now. I mean, it would just gut every single.
But what you're saying is that it's a gimmick to do it. You're talking about, again, roughly 70% of the tax bill, even if it's 75 to 80 total, 70% of your tax bill is staying in place no matter what.
That's right.
So, you know, you're talking about on the edges, so maybe there's a 30% wiggle room there, but either your government services, and we're talking sheriff, jail, 911, children's services, you know, that stuff will be cut.
Has to be.
Or we're raising a different tax, and there is some reasonable expectation of, are we gonna be a sales tax based community? I'm actually okay with that in a lot of ways, but that is not what they're proposing now. They're not really giving us the authority, like we did with the jail, to just go do it. If we think that's what is best, then do it. They're saying, no, put it up and now have a campaign of the voters, which is great, and it sounds great, everything should be done like that, but what we do is so under the radar relative to
Basic
water and sewer and all
services.
that type of, I mean, it's,
Basic services.
Exactly.
people don't think about that stuff.
I think it's an interesting conversation to be had after June 30th of, do we look at raising our sales tax to offset property tax and offer reform? That's a countywide decision that we could look at and do, but doing it with a gun at your head, which is basically what they're doing here, is not the way to do.
And really, the state should lead that conversation because of the uniformity that we would want from county to county, because even if we were willing to hypothetically raise our sales tax by, to 12% or 15%, and if they aren't similar in
Neighbors.
scope in the counties around us, what our ability to collect revenues on is gonna be, very limited.
It's a really good, I'm a sales tax proponent in a lot of ways, the Tennessee model, the Florida model, but it hurts if your neighboring states have much lower sales tax. You just drive next door to buy your products. It really hurts if the county next door has a much lower sales tax. I just drive to Butler County to buy my products, whatever they may be. And so, you've got to look at it a bigger, that's what the state is supposed to do. They're just not having those conversations. And I think it is a little bit incumbent on us to force it, to tell our rep, hey, we've got to start talking about these topics because they're not being talked about enough.
Could we have a work session with the three of them? I don't know that we've ever called for one. I'd like to get them all in here.
I don't think we ever have. It'd be really interesting.
Well, number one, would they show up? Number two, I think this should be a public discussion on
Yeah,
this.
yeah, I think once we get through
They'll send their representatives.
the budget, I think once we allow them to get through the budget, look, I think all three of our representatives have been very good and very open, and what I would not want them to feel is, as if, they aren't proposing this.
Right,
Let's be real, they aren't proposing this.
Oh, yeah, but they're gonna vote on it.
They're gonna
And
vote
they have
on
a
it.
voice.
And so, if we wanted to, they're gonna vote on it next week, more
Right.
than likely. So it'll probably be Thursday or Friday before, if they get this budget done in time. I suppose they could do a continuation, but, I don't know.
Doesn't feel like that's the
It
plan.
doesn't feel
Yeah.
like that, and so, they're gonna be up in Columbus next week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, maybe Friday, so if we wanted to do something, we'd have to maybe do an evening session,
This
where
week.
they can come back, or do it this week.
Thursday night.
Yeah, maybe do it Thursday night,
I love the idea of the three of you impressing upon them, whether in this room or elsewhere, what you guys have said. Because I know you've talked to them as much as I do, but I don't know that it's on top of their priority list. And none of the three of them have been really in local government, specifically at this level, none of them have. And so they don't see it the way you guys see it. I think it goes a long way. I think the auditors get ignored, rightly so, because we're annoying little accountants up in our little rooms. But the commissioners
Well,
get
you're
a
an
good
attorney.
feel. Well, that's true. I think
Those are
accountant.
You're an annoying
People
attorney.
like that better. People like the accountant better than the attorney. But yeah, I don't think that that's getting relayed to them enough. And they just need that knowledge base. And it's not grandiose money that we're spending on fun things. It's the basics. It's sewer. It's sheriff. It's that's what we spend our money.
well,
on.
given the nature, we can certainly see if we could get a meeting together. In order for the three of us, or two of us to participate in that, it would have to be an open public meeting. I think, Matt, having you there is important too. I know they've been hearing from you. Both Representative Tuska and Senator Wilson were at the Springboro Chamber event that I was at yesterday, and the superintendent of Springboro Schools and Tom Isaacs with the ESC and the other local governments were there, and so they certainly heard from all of the local governments about this issue. But I think for us to take a look at this letter that Martin offered up, make whatever changes we want to make and get it to them today, and if we want to invite them to a public meeting, I think it has to be
Next week.
or the end
Are
of
they
this
in
week.
session on Tuesdays?
Yeah.
Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Well, we can get them on the phone maybe,
Yeah,
yeah, a little Zoom call with them or
we
something.
could do a Zoom call, there's,
Well, thank you very much, Matt. I
Thank you for your
appreciate it.
time, I
Yeah.
appreciate you guys.
You take care.
Thank you,
And,
Matt.
before we end this session, is it worthwhile for us to comment a little bit? We've gotten an awful lot of mail about this farm on Central, and a lot of commentary, and so I'd like to express, we've received these emails from people. I was at the Warren County Foundation annual dinner just, I don't know, last week or something like that, where this organization got an award. So the public should know that, we don't have jurisdiction over this issue. So there are state regulations dealing with food retailers and having to be licensed with the state and subject to certain regulations. And this is, the entity that controls this is the Warren County Health Department, and not the county
the
commissioners.
district, it's
The
not a
district,
department
right,
of us,
the
it's a
district, right,
separate
it's a
political
district.
subdivision.
Exactly, and they're created by state law, and they have separate funding, and they are not under the jurisdiction or control of the Warren County Commissioner's Office. And so we've received an awful lot of email from people who have encouraged us, primarily, most of them, to support Farm on Central, which sounds like a wonderful farm and organization, but there's a very specific set of legal issues, both factual and regulatory. It's in court. One of our common pleas judges has the case. It was filed by the Warren County Health District. They're represented by the Warren County Prosecutor's Office as the attorney for them. And the issue, as I understand it, is whether or not they are a food retailer under state law, which involves a legal and a factual set of issues that has to be resolved in court, but it's not the county commissioner's office. Is there anybody else who, Bruce, am I right about all that?
You are, and yesterday the Common Pleas Court issued a TRO. It was not ex parte. That entity was represented by counsel and participated and was given due process, and the court has issued a TRO.
Okay, so a TRO means that for 2 weeks, their operations have been, I assume, ceased. I read the complaint because I received so much email on this. I actually went and read the complaint, which seems rather capable, and what they're saying is, in the complaint, is that they've been dealing with this farm for over a year, or if not more than that, to get them to register and to comply with the registration requirements and the licensing requirements, and they've chosen not to do it because they say that they're a private member association and that they're exempt from these regulations. And maybe that's true, I don't know, but it's not something that we're gonna decide here in the commission's office. And I certainly wish these people well, but really it's a question of whether they're a food retailer and whether or not they're accepting some $5 amount to join their private association, which has 3,000 some members, exempts them from a set of regulations which is meant to ensure the quality and safety of our food system. I think that's pretty much it. All right, thank you so much.
Before, Mr. President, before you ask for a motion to adjourn this and move into our work session, I would just like to, I know you all are aware of this, but I would like to just publicly state my just real sorrow and sympathy to the Seddon family. Tom Seddon, who we all know, who led the Warren County Foundation for many years, unfortunately got sick very, very quickly and passed a week ago Saturday, in very short turn. We I am still on the board and the past chair of the foundation, and we at the foundation are very sad by this, but I know that it impacts the entire community. Many of us have worked with Tom, whether it be on the Imagination Library or assorted sundry of other things in the community. And I'm just, you know, very sorry for his passing, and he will be missed. As is the case when these things happen, you know, business continues, and I want to assure everyone who's a partner with the foundation that the board continues to work to find his replacement and to make sure that all of the programs that the foundation funds in the community continues to happen. But I'm just very saddened by that loss, and incredibly sympathetic to the Seddon family and having to deal with this suddenly. So I just wanted them and the community to know that how much of a loss it will be to our community, but that business is continuing on, and in his legacy, the family is having a memorial service next month, so I'll make sure that the commissioners have that information.
Thank you, and when I was at the dinner, this was mentioned. That dinner, I guess, was not last week, but the week before that. And of course, he's been very prominent with the Warren County Foundation, and was missing at the annual dinner because of his illness. So thank you so much, and I appreciate that. I know that the Seddon family will too. David, any comment?
Yeah, it's a tremendous loss for the community.
Okay, do we have a motion to adjourn this portion?
So moved?
Yes.
Okay, yes to that. All right, now we reopen our next meeting and our general session agenda with our work session agenda. And we have first, Director of Children's Services to provide an update relative to Children's Services here with us today. Yep, Tanya Sellers. Nice to see you today.
Nice to see you, thank you.
So Tanya, you've been the director now for how long?
2 months.
The permanent director for
2 months. I'm at 2 months.
And they say, well, let's bring Tanya in first.
Yeah, she'll be the guinea pig. Yeah, that's fine. Good morning. I just wanted to give a few updates, brief. I won't keep a lot of your time, but just kind of some things we're working on, focusing on at Children's Services. So first on my list was Winnie, who is here. She's been with us since July of 22, so she's now 3. And
Talking about the dog?
yeah, wait, oh yeah, and Kelly. Yes, they're
Assuming that it was,
right there.
after you mentioned the 3-year-old thing, it was,
Kelly's a little older than
and what
3.
kind of a dog is Winnie?
She's an Aussie Doodle.
Okay. It's great those doodles getting everything, don't they?
She does. She's come a long way though. So we've had her for about 3 years now. And since that time, she's gone through a lot of training, certification. So she's now what's titled an AKC Therapy Dog Novice. That's right. Okay. And she's able to provide support for children during our removals, when they're in our office for placement changes, for meetings that kids come to our office for. She's also available to go to court when kids are testifying, to the CAC if it's requested. So she's great support for our kids and for our staff. She's the most popular employee at Children's Services. So she's doing great. She's come a long way. It's a lot of training. Kelly's done great with her. A lot of sessions. So she's come a long way. Help Me Grow. So we are kind of changing the way we're doing some Help Me Grow referrals. So typically, historically, we were referring kids that were named in an allegation of abuse or neglect. Since the beginning of 25, we've kind of changed that stance. So instead of just the children that are named in reports, we are referring every child we come in contact with that is meets the age criteria, so up to age 3. So whether that's a sibling in the home, a relative that's in the care of the family we're working with, we're referring everybody to Help Me Grow, just so we can kind of prioritize that early intervention and kind of get ahead of things before we get involved other ways.
Which is a voluntary program for
Yes.
parents to choose. It's nothing mandatory or court ordered.
Yes.
It is a referral to support the family if they choose to want to be in it. But I think ensuring that all of those very young children get the opportunity and are aware of it, because
Yes.
a lot of parents aren't aware
They
of
don't, yeah, they don't
of
know,
it.
and they have a great option of home visiting too. So they're, they'll come out to the home weekly, work with the parents, work on parenting skills, just try to identify any issues that are underlying. So it's been good.
So who makes that decision? Sounds like a fairly, because I remember when I first started, Help Me Grow was right in the crosshairs of people not liking that program.
Well, so we'll make the referral to Help Me Grow. It's ultimately up to the family. Now, sometimes if we are court involved on a case, we will put it as part of a case plan and ask for that to be part of the court order for them to comply and work with early intervention. But typically, these families will refer, they'll reach out, they'll do an assessment. Some kids don't qualify. They'll say they don't qualify for services, we don't have any concerns, and so they'll close out. The other kids that do qualify will either qualify for early intervention or home visiting. So there's two different programs that they can go into.
And
But
early intervention is specifically for young children with identified
Yes.
developmental delays. And so it's designed to be able to provide the early services
yeah.
so those kids are getting what they need prior to entering kindergarten.
Yes. So we have seen an increase. We actually met with them and been talking to them, and I think we are overloading them a little this year, since we have kind of changed how we are making the referrals. So we're working with them to kind of figure out how that works to make sure we.
But my question relates to, did you make that decision unilaterally, or how do we come up, if we make a change in policy that we've had in place for 20 years?
Yeah.
Did you just do that?
No, I mean it was discussions with administration too. We kind of talked about an uptick in some of the cases that we're seeing of these vulnerable kids in homes, and we might have had contact with them before. They weren't named in a report. Then later on, we get a report, and so we just felt like it would be better to get a head start on it earlier on versus waiting for them to be named in a report of abuse or neglect.
And Commissioner Young, I can't speak about times in the past where there may have been some frustration around Help Me Grow, but over the last, 6-8 years, the legislature and the governor have been both kind of narrowing the focus of it in terms of evidence-based models that are used and expanding capacity over time to try to reach more young children who are experiencing challenges at home. I think the issue that at least I have been talking to Susan about is, we are seeing an uptick in caseloads in children's services, and sometimes we are experiencing some of these children young that they're not, where we end up not opening a case because it's not needed, but down the road we will see these kids again in much worse circumstances where a case eventually has to be open. And so it's really designed, as the governor has been really focused on the children's services system, to try to intercede before these cases come to us and then we end up having to take custody and the child is in a much worse situation. So, I will give the legislature and the governor a lot of credit in really trying to focus that state-funded service in a way that tries to keep kids out of the children's services system by supporting the family in ways that allow them to be healthier and develop in a more productive way. So we don't see them in 2, 3, 5, 8 years down the road where we now have custody of this child, and the damage is much greater.
Yeah.
I think also the role of Children's Services is not just to investigate abuse and neglect and be very reactive. It's also to make referrals for the families to try to be more preventative or to address issues head on as everyone's saying. So we wanna make sure that if there is a service we think is needed or needs to add on, or that we can add to families, we can see better outcomes with these kids as they move towards kindergarten and addressing the issues when they're younger. So just making them kindergarten ready, healthy, address delays, anything like that, or being born positive. If a child is born positive for drugs, they automatically are eligible for the program. So they don't have to accept it, but usually we're involved and we can put that in a case plan. And if we file the case plan into court, it becomes a court order. So we wanna really, wrap these services around the family as much as we can. And then also, if we come out of a case, they can still be working for Help Me Grow, and allows for some more eyes to be into the household, watching that child. We want as many eyes on
Well,
kids as
again,
possible.
you guys are making compelling points of why. My point is, I believe that this should be a discussion for the board. I mean, this sounds like a policy change. It went from the named person, now we've decided, however you define we decided to expand it to other members of the family. Well,
It's
maybe-
just a
maybe that's
referral, Dave. We're not expanding anything. It's just the way we refer. It's just a referral. I mean, if you wanna discuss whether or not we refer kids that they identify that might benefit from this, I think that's fine, but I don't think that it was a policy change, as much as it was just operationalizing how do we try to prevent more kids coming into our children's services system. That's all. And it's,
Well, I understood that we did something the same way the last 20 years, and here in the last little while, we've changed.
Yes, there's state and rule, like Susan was saying, any child that's born positive for drugs is an automatic referral. So there's some policy around that, and that comes down from even
that's
the
a state requirement.
Yeah, there is some discrepancy for counties too. So like in the rule, it does say we can refer any age eligible child if we see fit. And we have in the past referred other children in the home if there's a reason to, if we see that there's a delay or there's a need for the family. We're just now trying to do it more across the board, just because we might not see it when we're in the home. We might not see that there's a delay. The parent might not report it to us, but that way we're making sure they get the supportive services in the front end, even if we're not fully aware of those.
Okay. Anything else?
No, I will say we're working with our community partners, so we're trying to reduce the older age kids for coming into our care. So we're working closely with coordinated care, developmental disabilities, juvenile court, probation, Ohio Rise. So we are seeing an uptick in some of our previously adopted kids coming into our care. So we're working with that population in the multi-system aspect. So we're trying to keep those numbers down.
Tanya, I at this Springboro Chamber event yesterday, I heard Tom Isaacs, the superintendent of the ESC, and the superintendent at Springboro Schools talk about the level of mental health issues, suicidal ideation, behavioral challenges that is on a dramatic uptick in the schools and at very young ages. Given what you just said about with older age children, especially those that have been adopted out of our children's services system now coming back, I'm curious, are you seeing a similar level of mental and behavioral health challenges among young people, suicidal ideation, but also at really young ages?
We are, even age 5, we've seen kids with age 5 with severe behavioral issues, and so we're kind of referring them to get wraparound services through the ESC. It's hard with that age too. It's hard to provide quality therapy for a 5-year-old who has no attention span to learn or
and
to
are
listen.
you finding community capacity resources in the community that are available to you to be able to share with these families? Are you getting calls from adoptive parents saying, I can't control this child, or my child is you know, I have no place to put my child who has this suicidal ideation or,
Yeah, like I said, the uptick in adopted kids is high. So once they hit adolescence, puberty, you see there's a change in some of them. Ohio Rise has been involved with some of these families. We still work with coordinated care. We meet with them monthly, and Ohio Rise monthly, just to kind of talk about these high-risk kids that we know about.
and is Ohio Rise providing actual services for these kids?
They typically don't provide a lot of on-hand services other than making referrals to other providers to help. So they kind of,
So what
they
do you-
also kind of offer case management.
Okay, I mean, a case management, I guess, is one thing, but what I don't ever understand, and I hear a lot about Ohio Rise, but what I don't see a lot of is actual services being provided that support these children and families, and so I'm trying to understand that the amount of money that has been invested in Ohio Rise, what are kids who are struggling and families who are struggling and are in hospitals and so forth, like, what are we getting from Ohio Rise?
They can offer or help the family seek funding for treatment and out-of-home placement. The problem with that is that sometimes then they've placed a kid, they've run out of funding, and then we get a call because the family still doesn't feel like they're equipped to care for the child. So then
I
we're
thought
getting-
Ohio Rise was solving for that problem. Like, that was the whole impetus of it, was to be
Yeah.
able to build capacity in communities and provide those services for those families. I mean, that's been the whole reason the legislature and the governor went down this path, is there isn't enough community capacity to meet the needs that is growing in community. So this is the billions of dollars solution to be able to build capacity and meet the needs. And so what I'm trying to understand at a very local level is the capacity being built in the local communities, and are the kids that you're seeing getting the actual services? These kids need another case manager like they need a hole in the head, to be
Right.
perfectly honest.
Right.
You know, they have 5 different case managers, including the one in their other managed care plan that they have that provides for their other health services. So help me understand, what is the value proposition when I hear these superintendents saying the acuities of these kids, the needs of these kids is not only growing, but at a much younger age, and it's not showing any signs of slowing. 6 years into Ohio Rise, is there the capacity in the community to meet the needs, and what does Ohio Rise have to say about it?
It's difficult. I will say our relationship with Ohio Rise isn't always the best. And it's a statewide issue. So when I meet with directors from across the state of Ohio for other counties, we all share the same concern about Ohio Rise. So what will happen is there are sometimes that they will help secure the funding to place a child in a residential care facility, but that funding eventually runs out. I don't think the wraparound services for the family to return the child home are up front and where they should be when the funding runs out. So that's when we're getting calls for these kids. I think we have probably 4 or 5 in our care, at least right now, that have been involved with Ohio Rise, have exhausted their funding, and then end up in our care anyways.
But how do they exhaust their funding? This is what I'm trying to understand. It is a managed care plan that receives a capitated rate from the state. How is it that this child and family runs out of funding? That makes no sense to me. And how is it that they get money on a capitated rate to go find other resources when the state's giving them billions of dollars to be able to, curb this, bend this cost curve?
It's MSY funding, and I'm not overly familiar with how the funding process goes or how they qualify, but I do know there is a cap. So it depends on if they're Medicaid eligible, if they were on Medicaid, or however they're involved with Medicaid, because some children are in Medicaid and then they have to get on a special Medicaid program to be even eligible for Ohio Rise. But there is MSY funding, and that funding does cap out. There is a max where they can't approve more funding for a child.
So I would like to dig into this a little more, and we can do this offline, but I'd really like to understand, like, what are the services that these kids have received and how that cap has been met. I mean, this is something that's, you know, really important to me, because when, you know, I see and hear about, like, I'm not seeing it firsthand because I'm not on the front lines, but when I hear it from school leaders, and I hear it from, you know, children's services, and I hear it from childcare teachers, and I hear it, you know, from preschools, and you know, this is a, you know, when we think about, you know, I of course am compelled on a very real kind of human issue. You know, I remember when I was in the legislature, I had families coming to me, and the only recourse they had was to relinquish custody of their child in order for the child to get the mental health services we need. Like, there's something wrong with that picture, is that these families are saying, please help us get what these children need. We don't want to give up custody of our children. That is important to me, that we're building a system that meets these needs. But from a financial perspective, when we're talking about basic services in the county, I mean, I'm really concerned about, you know, just the costs of these kids that are being borne more and more by counties, because there is no one else to do it. And so I hear all of this pomp and circumstance around Ohio Rise and how great it is. But in the very real world, I mean, when you take it from concept to implementation, it doesn't feel like we're any farther along today than we were 6 years ago.
And we are not the only county feeling this. So it is across the state.
Well, I'd like to follow up
Yep.
with this so I can understand it more, and because this is, when I think about the jail that has space today, and we know that in 10 years from now, it's not going to have space, and that we're gonna need to do an addition, it's this type of thing, that it's a pipeline, it's a pipeline into the criminal justice system, and we can't afford that, but also families should not have to endure this and have to give up custody of their child in order for them to get the mental health services they need.
Okay.
Any other questions?
No. Make sure I'm gonna pronounce your first name correctly.
Tanya.
Tanya,
Yep.
not Tanya.
Not Tanya, Tanya.
Okay.
But I'll respond to either. That's fine.
Well, I don't know, maybe it's because a lot of people call it Tanya.
I know.
Like a Tanya Tucker.
There's not, yeah, that's what I always say,
Yeah.
Tanya Tucker.
Tanya Tucker.
Yeah, think of that.
Yeah, it's Tanya Harding, but we're not talking about her.
No,
No.
she's a
Right.
different story.
She's a completely different story, I get that. Very good, well,
All right,
thank you so
thank you.
much.
Thanks, Tanya.
I've got 2 Australian Labradoodle puppies, and they don't act like that.
Do you want her to bring puppy
You
up
wanna
here? 'Cause she's
Yeah.
really loving
Yeah,
it.
you wanna see her?
You do something fun with her, like we can show you. Yeah.
You wanna show my lady too?
Show us what you do.
like, no.
I'm actually on leash and you have my remote.
Children never perform.
Thank you. Can you give high fives? That's it. Thank you. Can you lay down? Hey,
3 years old?
down.
She's three.
Yeah. We did about 2 years of weekly training though, so it definitely took, time.
And do you take her to the courts? Does she go to
Yes.
the courts with you? And how do the judges and magistrates, and what do they
Well, you
think
guys are
about
talking,
that?
I'm gonna go, I wanna talk, I wanna see this dog.
Yeah.
I'm a dog.
Judge Herbie loves her.
Uh-huh.
Anytime I show up without her, he's like, where's the dog?
Uh-huh.
Why did you come and hand it? And the magistrates are all very accommodating to her coming in.
And it's helping with the,
Yeah, she's a good girl.
it's how, the dog is helping kind of move cases through in a better, more productive way.
Yeah, she's definitely a needed distraction, specifically for removals and placement changes, because kids are coming into the agency, and it's always a hard day for them when they're going to a new place and they don't really know what's going on.
She's in her protected zone right now.
She knows that's where she's supposed to
Yeah,
go.
this is where she's supposed to stand. So it's a much needed distraction and redirection, just kind of redirects their focus from that hard time. You know, she's very playful at the office, so she loves toys, you know, she'll do her tricks.
Because sometimes these kids are speaking about their family situations, and
Absolutely.
it's very traumatizing, and this is to help them be able to communicate with the prosecutors and the judges
And also at the CAC, so when they're
Yep.
getting their forensic interviews and they're going through that time, she doesn't go in the room. But when they take breaks, they can come out, they can kind of pet her, again, just redirect that focus, have some positive energy, to be able to kind of go back in and do the hard stuff they have to do at the CAC.
This kind of goes to the conversation you had earlier with Auditor Nolan about that is Winnie was purchased not through any sort of general funds, it was a grant, and the grant was.
through the
not on-
Warren County Foundation.
Yeah, not only the purchase, but also for supplies and training and those types of items, so Winnie's been to prison, but in a good way.
Yes, she has.
Very good, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, finally, we have Candace, we're up for.
Oh, Melissa.
Melissa, I'm sorry.
Melissa's probably, you can skip me.
I was gonna say that, but I thought, no.
Hard act to follow.
I know, I don't have a dog. We do have Melissa Moore, Emergency Services.
Well, I mean, you know, because Candace is at the end of this, but I'm
Yes.
just skipping along here because we're having so much fun. Completely missed your session.
Yeah, so under Emergency Services, we have two departments. We have the Communication Center, the 911 Center, and then we also have Emergency Management, EMA. Some of the community events that we're doing this year, over the last several years, we try and add more, get out into the community and awareness and educate the public as much as we can. So this year alone, we have just some of them, our 4 national night outs, a Safe on Main event. We already went to State Envirothon at Caesars Creek to help out, Harlan Township Safety Program, local job and career fairs, National Weather Service spotter class that we combined with Butler and Montgomery County, Little Miami Safety Week at the school, Boy Scout tours and education, Stop the Bleed class, the Mason City Schools Hope Squad. We do a lot with the students over there at the high school, going over, you know, suicide prevention and what it's like to call 911 and what that looks like. And a lot of the kids come back over to the center for a tour, just to see what that's like, and that's been very positive. Another thing that I'm personally doing, I was in Leadership Warren County in 2023 class of, and for the 3rd year, Warren County Resource Rally, it was the project that I had, and I've continued on with that. So that'll be out at the fairgrounds on October 16th. So some of the members of my team have, you know, just too busy in their own departments and jobs. So I've got a lot of new people that are involved, and I'm excited for that. We should have a lot of new vendors, and it's a free event. We've moved it to late afternoon into the evening to get some of the public to come out and show all the resources that are not just provided here for that Warren County provides, but you know, down in Mason and Deerfield and Carlisle, just different agencies that have things that can help our citizens. EMA is hosting a lot of classes that we've had. We just had a school-based incident class where really great feedback. It was from higher-ups in the school system themselves, and police, fire, EMA, and we actually, first class we've ever had where we've had school, I had Little Miami and maybe Springboro was one of them, said, we need to hold this class for our entire school teachers upward. So they're looking to do that as continuing education for theirs. So that was really good. Tomorrow, actually, in here, we are having our last meeting for our hazard mitigation plan, which is a 5-year plan that we have to do through FEMA helps with any type of grant funding that any jurisdiction wants to apply for, and if their project is in the plan itself, then that helps with the funding for them to get the grant. And that's, since I've become the director, we have decided to do that in-house, and that is at least a $30,000 cut that you pay of someone else, a contractor, to do that for us, and we do that in-house, so we're pretty proud of that. Dispatch. Fully staffed, we're 34 dispatchers and 7 supervisors. Currently, right now, we just have 4 vacancies for dispatchers. We just hired 7 a couple weeks ago. 2 of those that we hired are actually from the Career Center. So we had 2 internship programs going in the EMA department and in the dispatch center. And the girl that was in EMA, she really wanted to do dispatch, but you know, she learned a lot on the EMA side as well. So when we didn't have something for her, she sat in dispatch. So those 2 are actually employed now. And so we're super excited about that. Yeah.
That's great. You have a very hard department to staff, and so anything that you're doing to
Yes.
get young people connected with this pressure cooker that you operate is a plus.
66% of our employees, the dispatchers, are less than 5 years here. So it's tough. And every time we go, you know, some of the admin goes to conferences, and we try and bring back, you know, what can we do different? What are we doing in our training that can help people stay? And this time around, this is our second set of employees that we've hired. And what we have done this time is we'll take 3 weeks, an 8 to 4 shift, a 4 to midnight, and a midnight to 8 shift. And we will have them work for 5 days on those 3 separate shifts to listen to the types of calls that come in, because those day shifts are totally different than the night shift calls that come in. And trying to get them used to what kind of calls, you know, they see watch 911 shows, and you know, they think they can do the job until they're sitting in the seat. And it's just, it's hard on them. We're finding a lot of our people that we're hiring are younger. So, and one of the other things that we've implemented is mandatory wellness training. So we have a clinical psychiatrist come in. It's paid for. It's a 45-minute on campus in a separate room. No one can see them or anything. They can talk about the weather. They can talk about calls that they've had, anything, but they're going to talk. And we've gotten really positive feedback on that as well, just helping them.
I say, Commissioners, I try on Wednesdays when we have new staff orientation. If I'm here, I try to meet with all the new staff and welcome them on board. But I try to spend a lot of extra time with those that go into dispatch and children's services, because obviously they're not getting called on good days. And I really try to help them to understand as best as I can in a short amount of time to sort of protect their mental health and things of that nature. And I know Melissa obviously is doing that, and her and Jesse, but I try to emphasize that because it's important, and we want to kind of get rid of some of that turnover type of scenarios. But we try to focus in on that specifically for those 2. Obviously want to welcome, but specific that.
Yeah. Last year we had over 320,000 calls created in the CAD system. By the end of May, the stats right now, we've had 22,731 911 calls and 41,791 admin calls, totaling, you know, over 64,000 calls so far by the end of May.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for all you do, Melissa.
Thank you.
You have a tough job. We never like to see you because it's usually not good news,
I
but.
like coming when there's good stuff to talk about.
But that's why we wanted to do these
Yes.
work sessions, so that we could hear from people when there isn't something bad happening.
All right, well, now we are to the determination of the CDBG project allocations. Candace, I'm sorry. I wanted to speed right up to you.
That's okay.
We're on schedule now. Candace Miller with Economic Development, and I'm here to continue the CDBG allocation discussion. I believe that you've received an updated spreadsheet ahead of this meeting. I'm not sure if you've had time to review, if you have any questions.
That's the spreadsheet, right?
Yes.
And the feds just made the allocation, so when we've seen this issue come before us, there was some question about the allocation, but we now have the actual allocation for this fiscal year, federal fiscal year that we're gonna get.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes, is the $872,108. So I'm happy to jump into this unless there were, I know that I'm kind of at the tail end of conversations that have already taken place.
Well, I'm just a little confused. So there's a couple, obviously different columns, which is the way we've always done it. Recent awards, is there a match? And then the current request, each one of these entities, and then award amount. Has this already been awarded?
No, this was directed sort of like Susan and I, that we just wanted the staff to sit there and come with a potential example of some of the review that they have done, and to see if there were other, like for some of these, if there's potentially other grant opportunities, capital budget. So this is merely a suggestion that they could present to you, knowing that you could love it, hate it, tweak it, but it was just a suggestion of some research that they've done on these topics.
Okay, so the award, what is the first top says a award amount, which is your suggested amount, right? Something that you proposed by staff. And then there's the 70% per request. That is what we would award, at least for the first 3 projects, if we gave them 70% if they requested, correct?
Yeah, it was just another way to look at it if we were interested in, so we have up to the $130,000 to fund for the public service projects. So listed under the award amount column and then the 70% of request, it was just 2 different ways to consider. Obviously, we don't have to do any one of those. We don't have to fund these projects in this public service bucket if we didn't want to. But if we wanted to fund that full $130,000 amount, we just put together 2 ways to consider doing that.
Ways of doing it.
Yes.
So, but it comes up to the same total. And then
Correct.
I see the suggestions below, and actually, my own personal opinion is I don't have any problem with your proposals on the ones below, given the fact that I think that the more important projects are the ones that you focused on, as opposed to a cemetery entrance and a resurfacing of a park and the Harveysburg demolition. I think the other ones seem to be more urgent and important to do as opposed to those 3. Not that those 3 are not.
I'm just a little surprised. So you guys are recommending almost $250,000 to the Historical Society?
That was, so under the current request column, those are all the requests that each project had. With the Historical Society, so as Martin had mentioned, some of these projects, because we know we can't fund all of them, they're all great projects, we would all love to probably fund all of them. There are some that flagged in my mind as potentially being eligible for state capital budget, which at the end of this year in the fall timeline, our office is gonna start kind of ramping up, getting community projects in the application process for that. So there were some here that are noted as being potentially eligible. There are some, such as the road projects, that are not eligible. The Harveysburg Community Historical Society, that was one, because it is a very large request. That was one, should they maybe want to go apply for capital budget, they're in that award amount, which is why I flagged it as yellow. Potentially, if the board wanted, it could even do match dollars that they could then put with an application to capital budget. So that was, again, just kind of a suggestion, and you could do that with any of these projects, quite frankly, so just.
That aren't road projects, 'cause
Yeah,
they're
and
not
the
eligible.
road projects would likely
Yeah.
not be, and we did reach out to the engineer's office, there's likely not other funding opportunities that they would have for these, because they're just they're smaller road projects.
And so because you're here presenting this, Candace, and maybe this is a question to Martin, my assumption then is that with Suzanne Mason leaving, that you have moved this process under economic development so that you've got, we're making decisions about projects kind of in a bigger context. Is that your thinking?
Yeah, that was one of the approach, thought about that is that, historically when individuals would come up with these CDBG projects, a lot of times they would be looked at by the board based off of, which is a good consideration, did they get money in previous years and those types of items. And I thought that with what the work with the Department of Development does throughout the entire community and what Matt, Candace, and others do is that they might be able to find some synergies, and also the fact that, as Candace alluded to, that their office heads up the capital budget process. So as an example, with the Harveysburg Historical Society, the historical societies through Ohio Historical Society are ones that band together and do things through the capital budget. So that's something that we could find ways to partner up. So I just thought that it would be a good idea, or at least on paper, and this is the first implementation thereof, is trying to bring something to you with staff recommendations that have been thought out, knowing full well that you may have a different set of priorities or you might like the work that they're doing. So that was the logic behind it.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense personally, because one of the things I always struggle with every year when we do this is CDBG can only be in certain census tracts. Like the money its purpose is to meet the low income census tracts, to be able to support those governments to do the government services that they can't do on their own. So, but it's often, I see a list of projects and they're deep community projects, and I rely on staff to be able to tell us if they meet the qualifications. But I'm often, there's never enough money, there's always more needs than there is resources. And I find it hard personally to discern between them, other than, as Martin says, it's like, okay, we're just sort of spreading it around. Who gets a chance this time, who has their local match together, what have you, which are important considerations, of course. We want to make sure that we are spreading it around. But I find that with, it's helpful to me to hear from the administration, like a recommendation, like based on what you know about all of the economic development dollars that are being invested in the community, based on, the needs. I like and appreciate the recommendation, knowing full well we make the decision, and there are things that we may bring to the conversation that you aren't aware of that are certainly important. So I appreciate this different way of looking at it, because it's just, and I think it's why a lot of times we defer making a decision on this, because it's like, well, what are we basing the decision on? The last thing that I would say, and this is a question for clarification, I believe under the federal law, we can only spend up to a certain percentage, and I think you have it up to $130,000 of this year's allocation on nonprofit organizations. We don't have to spend any of it, but historically we have. Is my understanding correct?
It's 15%.
And 15%. Yes. And so, I just want to put out there, for the board to think about, because this has certainly been on my mind, as this program and others have been under scrutiny by the feds and have been targeted for elimination. That's why we didn't choose the projects earlier, because we didn't have a distribution and we weren't even sure if we were going to get a distribution. I just am wondering if we ought to think about phasing out the dependence from nonprofit organizations on these dollars, not because they're not worthy of it, but because I am concerned about, how big this allocation will be over time, or even if the allocation will exist over time. And so I, want to say to my colleagues on the board, it's one thing to have one-time projects on here. It's another thing to offer operating dollars to nonprofit organizations who have other funding needs. And so I'm just raising the question to the board to say, you know, do we think it's prudent to think about, since we have a new leader now over this and kind of a new approach, do we want to think about, you know, do we want to think about this in a slightly different way and maybe have a transparent conversation to those that we've funded for a long time in the nonprofit sector to start to kind of phase them down so they have some notice, it's not overnight, so that we can preserve for the infrastructure projects, which is 85, has always been 85% for us. So that's just something I've been thinking about, you know, with respect to these federal resources, because these are federal resources, not county resources. And
I'd say it's something to think about. I tend to like to support those, simply because it does help them. Maybe, you know, they're avoiding fundraising, and asking for dollars because they're getting this, but I think it's an important part of something to show that we do care, because we do care about, especially those three organizations, what they do, and I think that's a appropriate use. I would say that, yeah, we should not be counting on these dollars. Federal government's $36 trillion in debt, and they keep doing things like this. I think a lot of local governments should be paving their own roads and have the ability to do that, and don't spend and keep annexing 187 acres into your community, which you're going to put high-density housing on, and then come and turn and ask us to repave your roads. So I think it all goes hand in hand, but it's, yeah, I'm fine with this year's application.
One of the things that I would add, maybe approach this, so I assume the Harveysburg Community Historical Society is not a governmental entity.
As far as I know, no.
Okay.
Nonprofit.
But the water tower in Harveysburg is undoubtedly something that is the responsibility of a governmental entity.
And that was one that specifically Bruce had, and Suzanne had even said that before she left, is we need to not fund that one because that was something that was already paid for with things long ago. So we as staff and had articulated to you, for lack of a better phrase, that we thought that that should already be removed out from the list.
Okay, and that's because it had separate previous funding for it and they chose not to use it?
Bruce can probably give a
They
little.
used it, the commissioners gave them money to do that project.
They just didn't use it for that purpose?
Well, they may have it for that purpose, but it's not enough money.
Well, and I think also too, Candace, and this is another reason why I thought it was appropriate for the Department of Development to have this, because they have overseen the demolition and the brownfield grants that have come down from the state. And Harveysburg applied for a demolition grant for this, was awarded, but still hasn't used the money and has, I don't know if they've returned it type of thing.
Return, basically.
They returned this money,
They
so
didn't move
they're
forward.
they keep on asking for the same thing that seems to have never have happened, so I think that's why we took it off the list.
And
as
it's not taking off the list as much of it is, you know,
reprioritizing.
correct. And obviously, you're free to fund whichever of the projects that
Sure.
you want.
My question was this, was whether or not we go back to Harveysburg and we say, we're not giving the request of the Historical Society to what they want, we're giving them something, I guess, really to just help them get some grants or
Should they
the
wish to
matching
apply.
funds.
Yeah.
But to ask Harveysburg, would you rather have it for this water tower or you give this to your Historical Society? I don't really care. But if we've given them to this previously and they've not used it for that purpose, I understand why our staff is taking them off the list. So I honor that.
And I would say on the demolition of the tower, I think legal counsel is opined on that one, is that he would recommend that we don't give them any more
Okay.
money for the demolition.
So with that caveat,
I have no problem
thank you.
with
I have no
what
problem with what you've recommended.
Yeah.
Very good, thank you.
And that includes the public service ones for this round, but then
Yes.
having maybe those conversations later.
Yeah.
And do we need to have a vote on that, Bruce?
I don't think so.
Nope, okay,
I
very
think you
good.
just have to start, they have to start the process, of publicly advertising for this and get the,
This is good work.
this is getting to the
Thank you.
point where, so.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for allowing us
Appreciate
to
it.
twist and turn. Thank you, Candace.
And does the board have anything else? Staff, anything? All
I
right,
do not.
motion to adjourn?
Public.
Oh, yeah, the public, yep, right. Thank you very much, Dave. Does the public, of which has not spoken, want to speak? Seeing none, we have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks for the work session. I think this was really helpful.